DW Africa Link.
What happens when the world's most powerful military signals a pullback from a continent facing rising instability? That's the ripple caused by a bold statement from the head of US Africa Command, AFRICOM. In announcing plans to adjust America's military strategy in Africa, the AFRICOM Chief called on fragile states to take greater ownership of their own security. Is this a strategic reset or a quiet retreat? And what does it mean for a region already battling insurgencies, coups, and growing foreign influence? Let's break it down. Stay tuned. My name is Josephine Mahachi. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter from Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The US military is shifting its strategy in Africa, urging allies to become more self-reliant in managing their security. This new approach was emphasized during African Lion, the continent's largest joint military exercise involving troops from over 40 countries. General Michael Langley, the US military's top official in Africa, highlighted the need for partners to conduct independent operations and share the security burden. Critics, however, warn that a diminished US footprint could create a power vacuum, emboldening militant networks and undermining years of counterterrorism efforts. Now, joining me for this conversation is Adeps Sani, foreign policy and security analyst, as well as our DW correspondent in Accra, Ghana, Isaac Kalechi. Now, I will start with you, Mr. Sani, just to also find out from you, what do you make of the US calling on African states to be more in control of their security, and which countries exactly are being referred to?
Well, historically, there has been a very progressive partnership between the US and many African countries, including Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and a whole host of other countries in fostering security, not only at the country level, but at the sub-regional and perhaps even regional level. Even at the AU level, there's been that partnership in fostering security in many of the countries that are affected by conflicts. Indeed, when Donald Trump first took over as president in 2017, he changed the American national security strategy, which, by the way, is changed after every 4 years, to reflect his policies. That is America first, inward looking. Okay, America needs to handle its problems, and Africa and other parts of the world needs to carry their crosses as well. But later he left, Biden came and reverted back to America, being sort of the godfather, so to speak, of the world. But when Donald Trump came back for the second time, he's been very categorical. And for close watchers like myself, we were not surprised when the USAID was scrapped, even though it reflected and promoted American soft power. The Trump administration didn't see the need to continue with it because, like always, America first. So the fact that the Americans are now asking us to handle our own security sort of is a reflection of the general, policies of the Trump administration. There's been intelligence gathering. There's been boots on the ground. If you remember the case of Johnson, the U.S. forces that were in Niger and came under attack by terrorists, resulting in some deaths. It became a huge national issue in America. They've been given a lot of the Army's logistics. Ghana has been a recipient. Americans had the biggest drone base in Niger and all that. So now that they are asking us to look into our own security, it's a major shift in U.S. foreign policy. So this is just a direct statement to us to, perhaps start thinking of looking elsewhere.
You touched on something quite interesting here, the US aid. Don't you think Africa can take care of itself?
It will be very difficult in terms of logistics,
Why?
in terms of logistics and technology. We are not there yet. Even Europe is not independent. Europe to a very large extent relies on American, power to protect itself. That is why Trump's policies against NATO is ruffling feathers in Europe. And recently, British Prime Minister said, hey, we need to be combat ready. We need to be able to protect ourselves. And the Germans and the French have also reiterated, knowing full well that they cannot count on America as a dependable ally. So it will be almost impossible for Africa to be independent so far as security is concerned. Security is a shared responsibility. Security is more progressive if it involves multiple actors. I mean, that is how things are done. But for Africa to think it can do it alone, in my opinion, is something that I strongly doubt.
Sorry, Kelechi, I'll just quickly come to you because this is quite interesting that what Adib has just said. Just in a few minutes for you to also just tell us how this US message has been received in Ghana and beyond.
I think largely many Ghanaians obviously would love to see that their country is more protected, more secured. And if you go, for example, to the northern part of the country where there are concerns about potential threats because of issues related to Burkina Faso, there are people who obviously would just want to have the whole area well protected. Where the support comes from, really, not ordinary people really may be part of that conversation. But in recent months, we saw the US actually donating some equipment to our military. Obviously tells you that the support is obviously there. I guess that this is just a caution coming from the US, and I think it's also for us to begin to be thinking about it. I know, for example, Ghana's president participating at a summit in Munich actually spoke about this issue about aid that is actually not coming from the US and the implications, and indicated that there's a need for Africa to start thinking about themselves. So I guess obviously as a government, they need to be thinking about that. But like Adeps Sani said, it's going to be difficult right now because we don't have those capacities to protect ourselves better from some of these threats. But locally, it's not a conversation really that ordinary people really are killing themselves over in code. Because obviously, again, Ghana is not so much under such kind of security run over like you have in some other countries in the Sahel area. So it is not a key topic of conversation for ordinary people, but for policymakers, it's something they need to think about because, again, the threats have been there for Ghana for some time now.
All right. Now, coming back to you, Adib, just to also find out what this really means or say of the US-Africa policy when it comes to security. Kelechi just touched also on something here, which was the Munich Security Council, the discussion day. China came up as well, and we all know the relationship between these two nations, but China is dominating in many parts of Africa.
Well, China's approach in the past has been economic. The Americans have been economic, but mostly military. Okay. Now we have the Russians also coming in strongly, both economically and military-wise. So the point seems to be a scramble. Everybody is scrambling for attention. However, like has been observed, I mean, this is a clear message. Hey, you guys need to diversify, so to speak, your search. Okay. We would have to rely on the Americans, but not just the Americans. We might have to go to the Russians as well. If you look at countries such as Burkina Faso, to a very large extent, they are relying on the Russians. I mean, the Russian mercenary group has been so present on the ground in Mali, in Niger, in the Central African Republic, in Mozambique. And so as to how effective that has been, it is difficult to say at this point. But surely it is important to recognize the need for us to use homegrown solutions to address our menacing security concerns, but at the same time, seeking partnership with other, actors beyond our borders.
Why is everybody scrambling after Africa?
Africa is a strategic partner. Africa has a large youth population, with the Africa Economic Outlook projecting that by the year 2045, the youth population will double. So in essence, we have the human resource. Africa is extremely rich, the richest continent in the world, rich in mineral resources, strategic reserves, uranium, and the rest. That's the Western countries, and of course, the Eastern countries are relying so much on. Okay, but the partnership doesn't come for free. I mean, you don't have Americans coming in just because they feel like. It's for a purpose. Okay,
Mm,
and so some of these resources are used to, run their industries all across the world. Okay, so that partnership, I must say, is a win-win for both Africa and the rest of the world. I mean, so I'm not surprised that there's been so much focus on Africa, especially the mineral-rich resource countries.
and also just to test if African states overall are able to protect themselves. I'm talking of those conflict-hit African states. Are they overall able to protect themselves? Or, of course, they need Russia, they need China, or they need America for them to be able to protect themselves?
Well, to a very large extent, a lot of countries are able to protect themselves. I mean, countries such as Ghana, South Africa, to a large extent, Kenya, despite terrorist attacks recorded. However, for a lot of other countries, they are bedeviled with a number of threats, both from outside and from within. For a lot of Africans also, they live under $1 a day. I mean, there are major socioeconomic and geopolitical deficits in a lot of these African societies that is cross-cutting. So it is increasingly more difficult, considering how the world is fast evolving, for Africa to be able to do it alone. Like I said, even Europe is not able to do it alone.
But Adip, I got a bit scared because this was coming from the US Africa Command Chief himself. I mean, calling on fragile states to take greater ownership of their security. This speaks in volumes, yeah? And also then critics warn that a diminished US footprint could create a power vacuum. Does America know something that we don't know?
The issue is America has been very instrumental, I must say. I mean, I work very closely with both state and non-state actors. I work very closely with the diplomatic community, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, America has been a close partner in countering violent extremism, especially in Eastern Africa and, of course, West Africa. We have relied to a very large extent on American logistics, the trainings, the exchange of intelligence in countering the threats. And in terms of human security, America has helped through USAID and other projects in uplifting a lot of households, especially in rural communities, from poverty. They've worked very closely with the civil society organizations, which I belong. I've worked with the Americans and other partners in advancing human security in our societies. So if America takes its hands off, it's going to hit us really hard. It's going to motivate the terrorists to carry out more lethal, audacious attacks, knowing full well that, hey, there's no big brother to fight for them. Okay. It's going to dampen the spirits of our soldiers who are fighting on daily basis against these threats. And of course, it's going to put a lot of economic pressure on the various countries. I'm not an economic expert, but I do know that it affects the currency, it leads to inflation, and cost of living goes high, and it has a rippling effect across the chain value. But one thing is important for us to understand, okay? America has a foreign policy. Whatever it does should be in the interest of America, just as Kenya, just as Ghana, Nigeria, and the rest. Okay. So the question they first ask is, what is of value there? That is why the American government came under sharp criticism following the downing of the Black Hawk in the 1990s in Somalia. resulting into American soldiers dying. A lot of Americans ask, like, what is of value there? What are we fighting for? The same can be said about Afghanistan. After so many years of killings, of destruction, the American government was like, to what end? So they felt, hey, there's no need, let us withdraw. So before the Americans go in, they ask themselves very pertinent questions. How does it benefit us? Okay, so in the end, I think that the focus should be everybody winning.
Now, Isaac, just to quickly come to you, as Adib just said, if America ceases to be a partner, Africa will really feel this. Just to find out, I don't know, you are in Ghana, you report a lot about Ghana security, economic, political issues. Is Ghana able to protect and defend itself from extremist attacks if really US decides, you know what, goodbye, we're done?
I think Mr. Sani even highlighted that in a way that, yes, I think that Ghana can support and defend itself. I mean, we have a very formidable army that, to a large extent, we've had threats, for example, to the country from our neighboring countries when it comes to extremism, but they've been able to take things up. The reason why we see this is because largely the country isn't really battling any kind of major security threats besides the normal threats that every country will have to deal with. We have some conflicts here and there in the northern part of the country, but largely these are being dealt with. So for me, yes, Ghana can, but again, if we begin to have so much of the pressure coming in, obviously, then you see that, yes, the army or the security agencies could be overwhelmed. And of course, when it comes to security, no country really can say, I can fully take care of everything, because you cannot really anticipate what can overrun your established forces. But I would say, as we speak, we are not so vulnerable like other countries, particularly that the US commander is trying to give this kind of signal to. I think that we can't take care of our issues, but we need that support. And again, insecurity is not just about you have the men, but you also need some kind of cooperation, collaboration, security, intelligence-wise, and all kinds of collaborations with other countries so that you can be able to fight crime effectively.
And I know that Adib has touched on the collaboration in terms of security, but you cover on overall aspects of Ghana. Just to also ask you, Isaac, how has the US collaboration been on the ground overally?
No, I think it's been great. Like I mentioned, just a couple of weeks, or let me say a couple of months, there was some kind of donation, for example, from the US, to our army in terms of equipment and some kind of vehicles and stuff. And of course, it was covered widely in the media, where obviously then that kind of narrative came in again, that, well, the US is still giving us support. We seem not to be so much independent, but again, we are getting the support. But I think the US sees it as an important gesture because of the ties between US and Ghana. But even in the bigger sphere of ensuring that if Ghana is well secured and is well equipped, obviously threats like from Burkina Faso and co can be actually dealt with. And so I would say that largely the support from the US has helped us, because it's not just about the equipment and the vehicles and all the stuff. And some of these supports also come from other countries like Germany and co, but also the trainings they give to our army personnel, and also the intelligence that they actually exchange and give us. Those are very valuable to help us to be on top of the game and ensuring that we protect our borders.
Right. Now, Adib, I know you say that we need America in Africa. If they decide to pull out, it will be a mess. But look, there is no way we can force them, right? In case they just come today and say, we are done. We are done. Could this be a blessing in disguise, actually, to also reduce dependency? And if that's the case, what should Africa start doing now? Because look at what happened. Nobody saw the US aid cuts coming. Nobody saw this whole tariffs issue coming. Anything can just happen. One day, any morning, you hear President Trump saying, you know what, that's it. We're done with Africa. We're not partnering with Africa. Then what next?
Well, there are opportunities in every, situation. So this should put us in readiness. This should give us an opportunity to prepare and partner more collaboratively amongst ourselves within the sub-region going forward. There's a need for Ghana to share intelligence with Burkina Faso, with Mali, and other countries, within the sub-region. That is why some of us were very shocked when then President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo went to Washington, met then Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, and spoke about the presence of Wagner in Burkina Faso and that it posed a threat to Ghana and all that. We felt it was a diplomatic gaffe. It shouldn't have happened in the first place because it destroys the goodwill between the two countries. And I must say, without Burkina Faso, it will be very difficult for Ghana to safeguard its borders. Then later, the government realized the mistake they had made and went to apologize to the Burkinabe regime. And when President Mahama was elected, one of his first official trips outside of the country was go to, Burkina Faso and these other Sahelian countries to go like, hey, we are back. Let's be friends again. Sorry for what happened, in the past. So there's a need for us to collaborate amongst ourselves rather than relying hook, line, and sinker on the Americans. And we also need to build our defense industry. I think that is critical. And I've always contended that we need to explore both kinetic and the non-kinetic approaches. Building the industrial complexes, building the capacity and capability of our armed forces is good for the kinetic. But for the non-kinetic, governments would have to dedicate resources to developing their people. That is a much more sustainable way of dealing with the myriad of security threats that these countries face on daily basis. We need to root out corruption, not completely, because it's almost impossible to have a corruption-free society in any part of the world. But if we are able to reduce it to its barest minimum, trust me, those money that goes into the pockets of private individuals will be used to improve on the lives of the people. Let's address issues of marginalization. In Ghana, for instance, the Fulbis are mostly marginalized. In Burkina Faso, the same can be said. And terrorists take advantage, explore the grievances of these people, and use them for terrorist activities. So we need to really address these structural issues if we are committed to addressing those security challenges we face today.
Right, well said. And that concludes our discussion here. Adeps Sani, foreign policy and security analyst, thank you so much for joining us, as well as our correspondent in Accra, Ghana, Isaac Kelechi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
At the Africa Link podcast, we always look across the continent to see how the stories play out or even at times overlap. A few weeks ago, the U.S. reaffirmed Kenya's state as a major non-NATO ally, MNNA, underscoring its role as a key strategic partner, even as Washington grows uneasy over Nairobi's closer ties with Beijing. U.S. Africa Command AFRICOM Chief General Michael Langley called Kenya indispensable to regional counterterrorism efforts. Meanwhile, countries like Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have scaled back their dependence on U.S. military support, turning instead to Russia and China. While these alternative alliances have yielded some short-term gains, results remain mixed. The limited impact of military solutions highlights the need for stronger governance and local ownership of security rather than over-reliance on foreign forces. Food for thought. That's it for this edition of Africa Link. Remember, you are not just a listener, but a part of our community, and your engagement can shape the direction of our discussions. We value your insights and encourage you to share your thoughts with us. Remember, you can find all of the Africa Link podcast episodes on Spotify and Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts from. This episode was co-produced and edited by Eddie Micah Jr. My name is Josephine Mahachi. Thanks for listening. Until the next one, it's bye for now.
DW. Made for minds.